thousands and thousands of you still regard Guyana as home. When you refer to home, you still consider home to be Guyana. You still follow developments very closely in Guyana. You still wake up in the morning and check Guyana newspapers and Guyana news. You still offer commentary on important issues of public and general importance. You still yearn for the days when you will retire and return home to Guyana. And for that strong sense of belonging, strong attachment, strong commitment to Guyana, your home, we thank you, those of us who are here. And on behalf of the government, we thank you for that strong attachment displayed, strong commitment displayed to Guyana, your home. And Guyana really does remain your home. In relation to today's event, I want to say to you, as I've said on a number of other occasions, that we really are standing at a truly historic moment in Guyana's history, and in particular in Guyana's economic history. For generations, we have spoken of and we've heard of Guyana's vast potential. For all of my life, I've heard of Guyana's the vastness of Guyana's potential for the entirety of the lives of our parents and indeed our grandparents. They too spoke of Guyana's vast and remarkable potential. And we've waited for generations for that potential to be realized. I don't believe it is an exaggeration to say that we're standing at the moment right now when that vast potential that has been spoken of and celebrated for generations, we're now standing at that moment when that potential is going to be realized. Today's generation, this cohort, is the generation and cohort that will witness the realization of Guyana's long anticipated and long heralded potential, but not only the to this ultimate realization of Guyana's vast potential. It really is a truly exciting time in our country's history. And in particular, from an economic standpoint, I'm convinced that it's not an exaggeration when we say that this is the moment that we've been waiting for in Guyana for generations. Make no mistake of that. Equally so, I was very happy that the president said it, not surprised that he said it, because I've heard him say it before, but I was very happy that he said it. Make no mistake of it, that the excitement about this moment to which I just referred is perhaps partly about oil and gas, but it is certainly not only about oil and gas. There is, of course, a remarkable amount of excitement and enthusiasm about what is happening in Guyana's oil and gas sector. And indeed, we are now an oil and gas producer, and we are about to become a major player in the oil and gas sector. Much has been said about this, and you no doubt already know about what's happening in the oil and gas sector. But I wish to say that in addition to all that is happening in the oil and gas sector, there is indeed a remarkable level of excitement, and there are remarkable prospects around the rest of the economy, what I describe as the non-oil economy. And arising out of oil and gas, associated with what's happening in the oil and gas sector, is of course the wide range of issues connected to the production and services associated with it. But we as a government having looked at and considered the experience of so many other countries that have gone down this path before, and wanting to take advantage of the positive experiences of some of these countries and also to avoid the pitfalls that we've seen some of these countries encounter, we recognize the importance, we recognize the paramount importance of ensuring that there is a large, strong, competitive, vibrant, and growing non-oil economy. And our government is placing a lot of emphasis, not just on facilitating oil and gas and what's happening in the oil and gas sector, but our government is placing a tremendous amount of emphasis on ensuring that we put in place the conditions that would be conducive to and facilitative of a strong and vibrant and growing non-oil economy. And His Excellency the President spoke about a number of the specific sectors within the non-oil space, which we intend to be the focus of significant growth and the source of significant growth in the months and years ahead. If I might very briefly repeat some of these, the President spoke about many of these already, but if I might very briefly repeat some of these, first and foremost, for a very long time, we have been speaking about Guyana's potential to be the breadbasket of the Caribbean. We've spoken about the vastness of Guyana's potential in agriculture. We see agriculture and agro-processing and agribusiness as an extremely important source of growth in the economy, an extremely important avenue, an important sector in which we anticipate significant investment and from which we anticipate significant growth in the non-oil sectors of the economy. So agriculture, agro-processing, and agribusiness more generally will be an extremely important sector going forward. Secondly, the President also spoke about tourism and hospitality. Here again, Guyana's remarkable potential emerging from our incomparable natural endowment of vast flora and fauna, our vast, pristine rainforest, the natural beauty of our country, have long been identified as positioning us uniquely to grow and to offer to the global market a unique and very special product in the ecotourism and the nature-based tourism space. We see tourism and hospitality being an extremely important sector going forward, and that's not just that's not just hotels and providers of accommodation to tourists. It's also there are other sectors closely associated with tourism and hospitality, including things like tour operators, including things like transport providers, including things like alternative providers of accommodation, things like Airbnb and so on, are increasingly establishing a presence in Guyana. And so things like restaurants as well, and providers of indigenous cuisine and local domestic Guyanese cuisine, and even international cuisine to the tourists who will be visiting Guyana. So there's a remarkable set of opportunities in tourism and hospitality. Secondly, thirdly, the President mentioned environmental and climate services. Here again, we see the tremendous potential, not just for the public sector from the standpoint of us mobilizing what we're doing from the point of view of sale of climate services to the world, as was exemplified by our agreement with Norway, but also environmental and climate services from a private sector standpoint, including things like consultancy and advisory services because of our unique advantages as they relate to the environment and climate services. Fourthly, I would say transport, communications, and logistics. Here again, a lot of this is about oil and gas, but not all of this is about oil and gas. We're investing heavily in ensuring Guyana's connectivity with our neighbors. President mentioned that the foreign minister is currently in Suriname in talks with the Surinamese authorities on bridging the Quarantine River. We're also working this year on starting to upgrade the road to Lethem. And as you know, we already have a bridge over the Takatu River. So you can literally drive to Brazil. Once that road is upgraded, this year we have resources to start an upgrade on the leg from Linden to Mabura, the first leg going south. And our intention is to complete that road all the way to Lethem, which therefore means that you're going to have road connectivity to the northern states of Brazil. You're going to have road connectivity to Suriname and through Suriname to French Guyana, which present a tremendous opportunity as it relates to transport, communications, and logistics through Guyana and in Guyana, including things like deep water harbors and ports, the services associated with those, road haulage and transportation, etc. Fifthly, value-added manufacturing. Here again, one of our priorities is in investing in cheaper and more reliable power. You've heard of the Gas to Shore project and of the Wales Development Authority, which is going to see gas landed onshore and used for electricity generation, which in turn, by bringing down the cost of energy and cost of electricity, immediately presents an opportunity for manufacturing and processing, and will reduce the cost of processing and manufacturing significantly. And so that is also, of course, linked to agriculture, because for a long time we've been a producer of primary products, including primary agricultural produce, but we have an opportunity now to process those and to package those in forms that will add value and generate more incomes for the tremendous business opportunities. In addition to those, I would say that there are other areas like ICT, information and communications technology. I think President also mentioned call centers, business process outsourcing, or Vice President mentioned call centers and business process outsourcing. Right now, we have thousands of young Guyanese persons working in call centers, providing services through those call centers to major global companies, companies whose names you would recognize from around the world, major global players. There are call centers in Guyana that are and business process outsourcing companies in Guyana that are providing services to some of the biggest companies of the world. And there's a huge opportunity for investment in call centers and more broadly in business process outsourcing in Guyana. And so there's and I could go on, I won't go on for too much longer because the more important thing is for us to take your questions and to respond to them. But I will say that in literally every sector of economic activity, there are opportunities for investment and opportunities for growth. And at a governmental level, we are prioritizing and emphasizing the importance of growth in the non-oil economies, in the non-oil sectors of the economy. Related to that, the session is also titled, of course, I think, investment and trade opportunities. And I will say this, that we already produce in Guyana a number of very good exportable quality products, but we don't right now see them on the international shelves for a variety of reasons. And I will say to you that there are incredible opportunities to export Guyanese products. And literally every day I have conversations with companies that are producing or that are investing and will be producing things that are potentially exportable. And you have an opportunity in the diaspora to explore, avenues for Guyanese products increasingly to be on international shelves. Wherever I've traveled in the world, I've derived a special satisfaction in going and searching for Guyanese products and finding them on the shelves. Some you find on the shelves, we see Guyanese rum, Eldorado rum, of course, and Guyanese rum more generally. You do see Guyanese rum on many shelves around the world. In many, many countries I've seen Guyanese rum, but you don't see many other Guyanese products. Yesterday I was having a conversation with a company that's going to be producing at scale coconut products. They're going to be producing coconut water, coconut cream, coconut milk, etc. You know that you can go into any supermarket in the US and you will see a shelf that will have coconut water produced somewhere in Latin America, perhaps. You'll see coconut cream, you'll see coconut milk in cans or in other containers on the shelves being sold. But none of these are produced in Guyana, yet we have vast coconut plantations in Guyana. And I give that as only one example. 2 weekends or 3 weekends ago, I was in Linden and I met a company there who are producing and packaging plantain chips. And these are excellent world-class packaged plantain chips. You know, you could go to the shelves on pretty much any US supermarket and you'll see nicely packaged plantain chips imported from here again, probably somewhere in Latin America, but you're not going to see the Guyanese plantain chips. And I give that again really just as one example of the multitude of opportunities that there are for Guyanese products to be packaged in a way that is suitable for international consumption, potentially to be competitive on an international market, and to be exported out of Guyana and to be found on shelves in supermarkets, in shops, in specialized stores around the world. And we want to see more of that. So today's event offers us an opportunity to start that conversation, but it's going to be an ongoing conversation to which we as a government are strongly committed. So I will stop there. I am joined by a number of colleagues today who will be introduced by Floyd. They, I think, will have additional remarks to offer, and then we can go straight into the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, for that very elaborate introduction. Again, you're hearing it from the decision makers. This is your time to ask all the questions. Continue to type your questions in the chat room, make them brief. We will also select individuals randomly to ask questions directly. Our next panelist is Honorable Minister Colin D. Kroll. Colin.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our listeners. You've just heard His Excellency, the President and the Vice President outlined in terms of our policy. And you heard the recent speaker being a Minister of Finance. So what I'll do in the interest of time to allow you to have more interaction, I'll go specifically into my sector and to quickly outline the housing and water sector, focusing mainly of the area of interest I think you may have from the diaspora. And so allow me to give you a quick tour. And first of all, if we can start with what's the mandate. And the mandate we have the presentation, so it will be useful for you. So our mandate involves policy development and administration, housing development, as well as water service expansion. Of course, for today, I think your area of focus will be more on the housing. In terms of our target, you've heard the President outline that our commitment of 50,000 houses, with that inclusive of the beneficiaries that are creating employment. But in all of that is for us to develop new communities, to develop in a holistic way that includes the infrastructure. And of course, infrastructure comes the water and electricity. And so that is our overarching target for the next 5 years. In terms of the agency for our implementation, of course, Ministry of Housing has two major agencies, that is CHPA as well as GWI. The CHPA, the Central Housing and Planning Authority, if I can speak a little on their role and more about them, while they've set up in 1948, we have a board of directors for which the CHPA CEO and the staff has to report to. And of course, the focus is on land, whether it's for residential, commercial, and industrial. So you have a wide range of reach, but also about affordable housing. And that is why you'll see in our work program now, and Vice President alluded to, ongoing construction of 300 houses that are being done through the CHPA. That is intended to allow affordability through the banking system. And of course, for remigrants, we also, you are also part of our planning. And CHPA, therefore, has a role to collaborate with various stakeholders, because we also have issues about, in addition for development of housing schemes, we also have issues of squatting that has been ongoing for decades. But it also the interconnecting within communities, hence the alluding to our massive road project to link the East Bank as an access road in addition to the main East Bank corridor. Now, if we can go on, and this would be of interest for you, the listeners, in addition to their role, CHPA has a role of approvals. And you've seen recently in the news a matter that was highlighted, because while our close relationship with Go Invest, and you have Peter here who will speak following my presentation, our role is for guidance, first of all, in providing an advisory should you want to invest. And so the whole aspect of planning and its land use, that is a major role that we play at CHP. So we have a planning permission department that interfaces obviously with both homeowners as well as investors. Because for homeowners, if you're constructing beyond 2 stories, then you will have to come to CHPA for that approval. And so I want to urge you, therefore, that before you embark on any investment, well, the focus with Go Invest has to do with the policies, incentives, the zoning aspect, which will save you a lot of time and unnecessary resources. Please consult the CHPA. Now, who can access land for housing? You have any citizen, whether you're a resident or a remigrant, or you're living in a diaspora, you can access housing for, of course, as I broke it down, housing, industrial, or even for commercial purposes. And the opportunities for housing are varies. So you will want to be able to say that as a citizen who resides here, you can easily go online, and this is something we've improved on. And it's not only about the COVID, but it's also to make the system much more user-friendly. So you can have access to for application that can be done online, and then the final process, which is the interview stage, that can be done virtual. And of course, you have two means. That is through the Central Housing and Planning website, and the portal is there. You click on land application, and there's an option for remigrants. There's an option there that you can choose when applying for land. And likewise, there is also the option for
you want to give us a hand here?
For approval process. How long does it take for an application process? And as I said, we have improved the system, so it's much shorter than it has been obtained before. We have strengthened the flow within the ministry and CHPA to allow it to be more efficient and effective. You can now do follow-ups on your application online. And of course, if there's updated information, this can also be done online. In the approval process, we are also focusing this year on the single window system, electronic single window system. And that's why on the screen you have it's imminent, because we have started work. And so we are expecting to have this laid in Parliament before the year is finished. And the intention for all of this is to make the application process easier, but it is also to shorten the time period for which sometimes there are complaints about awaiting approval. And for you, the diaspora, remigrants, etc., this would be of interest to you. And what we hope, our desired outcome with this electronic system, you will be able to key in and to assess where or at which agency your application process we are waiting for a feedback. What do I mean by that? When you're applying for an approval process for construction, there are a number of, the first agency that you must stop at is the Central Housing and Planning Authority, and I want to make that very clear. And there are a number of agencies that for which our planning authority will send out for necessary no objections that we have to work in collaboration. For example, the local authorities, that is the neighborhood democratic councils and the municipalities. We also have to interface with the Environmental Protection Agency. In many cases, the Guyana Fire Service, and those are some of the agencies for which we must get that feedback of their approval or their no objection. And a report is then generated, and that is sent before the Central Housing and Planning Authority Board for approval. And so what this electronic system that we intend to do will also do, it will also have timelines for those agencies for which we need to have a feedback. So if we do not, first, let's say we give them 3 weeks, if we do not receive a response in that time, then we will make some assumption at CHP in order to move the process forward. And so for approvals, we are working on a desired outcome of within a month or 5 weeks, the most. Can homeowners, and I'm asking these questions because of some of the questions I think you may want some answers to. So can homeowners, investors buy land, or in many cases you're interested in the condominium type of housing? The answer is yes, but at present we have just started the work on the legislation that will now give coverage for condominium type of houses. The legislation we have now does not give that full coverage. And what do I mean by that? In Guyana, our legislation currently, it caters for more single ownership of homes. And so for sharing types like condominiums, the issues arise in terms of when at the bank or in terms of the insurance companies. And so you can expect within another 4 months, we will be bringing to Parliament for passage legislations to allow the necessary amendment to cover this type of investment of housing. So in conclusion, I think for all of us, you can be rest assured that you have a government and you have a ministry and you have an agency that understands that information is key for you to providing the necessary guidance, but also time is of essence. And so we have placed heavy emphasis on improving our service delivery at the ministry and at Central Housing and Planning Authority so that for all of us, we can address your challenges or your issues in a timely manner. And of course, if we also have a Ministry of Housing and Water website for which you can access. So those would be my broad outline in terms of our role and our mandate, for which I think would be useful for the diaspora. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin, for that great presentation. And again, what we're seeing here, the running theme is that Guyana is open for business and welcomes its diaspora. There is just no shortage of information. You're being bombarded with lots of information, but that goes to the transparency and speaks to the transparency of this administration. Our next panelist is Dr. Ramsarup, CEO of Go Invest. Peter?
Thank you, Floyd, and my colleagues on the panel. You know, it's very exciting to, as a former member of the diaspora, you know, returning to Guyana decades ago, I can tell you it was the best thing I've done. I've struggled through some issues, but it's, you know, some of you drive around the world with your Guyana flag on your dashboard, you wear the flag on your shirt. We are a family, no matter if we live in Guyana or we live around the world. As I listen to our president, you know, it reminds me of a quote: we're not here anymore to predict the future of Guyana, but we are here to make firm the arrangements of its arrival. And this conference is a significant step in making firm those arrangements for Guyana. Dr. Singh outlined quite a few of the opportunities that the president has outlined. As a Guyana Office for Investment, our job, mandatory or mandate, and must, is to facilitate those investments from both foreign and local investors, and especially our local and diaspora Guyanese. You know, our president has renewed the dream of many of us that always believe, and as Dr. Singh said, we have moved from potential to opportunities in our country. Guyana is the gateway for those opportunities. I urge you to catch the president's vision and to push your knowledge and your investment opportunities. He has outlined many incentive initiatives in area of agriculture, in areas of technology and infrastructure. There are significant investment opportunities in those areas. If you study the 2021 budget that Dr. Singh presented in Parliament, you will see some of where those opportunities are. I get calls every day of what should I invest in? And a lot of the things that you may need to invest in, you really don't have to interface significantly with government. We are here, though, to facilitate that. Renewing the dream. Our president has renewed our dream, as I said. He has created back a national sense of pride, tying all Guyanese around the world to ensure that we connect on every opportunity that we present in our nation. As you have seen in the budget, and our president has outlined, he is modernizing our known industries, agriculture, making it a global sector, connecting the Caribbean, connecting our products around the world. Our office is there to help our local Guyanese too with trade opportunities. You know, we're taking the side of innovation and technology. Dr. Singh talks a lot about the call centers. We are looking to expand that opportunities around all regions in Guyana. Technology and fiber is moving throughout. I was in Essequibo Coast last week. Fiber is running on that coast, so we can set up a call center in Region 2. So the opportunities exist. You know, if we take that side of innovation, we modernize our known industries, as we are doing in our sugar. There's a lot of byproducts of the coconut that Dr. Singh mentioned. I did visit the Pomeroon, and I can tell you, there is so many opportunities in the value-added products of our raw materials. We are moving ahead. So as you listen to what we have to say here today, and as you interface with our office, we have a great portal that is able to fill out your expression of interest form. You can study the incentives that government is willing to give to investors coming back into our country. We are here to help you facilitate that process. It's our mandate, it's a must. Our customer service must be there directed to you. And again, welcome to our integration between our local and overseas Guyanese. And I look forward to meeting you and talking with you on investment opportunities and making those things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. At this point, one of our panelists, Dr. Singh, has to leave early. So what we're going to do is change the format a little. We're going to ask a couple of questions that are related directly to Dr. Singh's portfolio. And then we will come back, introduce the remainder of our panelists, and then continue with our questions. So at this point, I'm going to pose a couple of questions. I'll read both of them, and then I'll let Dr. Singh answer. So the first question is, with the amount of oil found in Guyana, how will that affect the dollar vis-a-vis the US dollar, the Guyana dollar vis-a-vis the US dollar? Second question is, are there any tax and other incentives for private investors ready to invest in Guyana?
Just to mention that I think I did have an engagement immediately after this, but I'm trying to re-engage. As you know, we changed the format a little bit, so the length of this event has been extended a little bit. I'm trying to rearrange my next engagement so that I can stay for as long as possible. But in relation to the two questions that you asked, first of all, I'm glad that one of the participants asked about the exchange rate, because this, in fact, is an absolutely important issue from an investment environment standpoint. No investor wants to come into an investment destination where they are beset by unpredictable macroeconomic conditions. So investors typically don't want to come into a place where there is uncertainty and unpredictability, either as it relates to exchange rate, interest rates, domestic price levels, things like inflation, etc. So stability stability and predictability are generally seen as conditions that are conducive to investment. And we recognize this, we've recognized this as a government for a long time. We recognize that it's important to ensure that investors coming into Guyana will find a stable and predictable environment from a macroeconomic standpoint. So they don't have to worry about exchange rates moving sharply to deteriorate the competitiveness of what they're producing. They don't have to worry about interest rates or inflation rates spiking dramatically or moving in an unpredictable way to affect the value of their investment or the predictability of the investment environment. So that's so I'm really glad that the question was asked, because it gave me an opportunity to make that. As it relates to oil production and how oil production and the revenues that are generated by oil production can potentially affect the exchange rate. It is a fact that in some countries where oil revenues are not prudently managed, it is a fact that the rapid inflow of foreign exchange can result in dramatic or sharp exchange rate appreciation, which in turn could affect the competitiveness of the rest of the economy. In fact, this rapid inflow of foreign currency and sharp appreciation of the exchange rate is in fact an important part of what is described as the Dutch disease phenomenon, a phenomenon that results in the rest of the economy, the non-oil economy that I mentioned, having its competitiveness eroded. The way that we are proposing to manage the oil revenues, including the setup of a restructured sovereign wealth fund, Vice President and President spoke about this earlier, is designed to ensure that the flow of oil revenues to the domestic economy is managed in such a way that you don't have sharp or unpredictable movements in the exchange rate. So I can assure the person who asked that question that we don't anticipate, our intention is to maintain stability in the exchange rate. We don't anticipate any sharp or dramatic movements in the exchange rate as a result of the oil revenues that are going to be coming. And that's going to be a fundamental part of how we set up, we operationalize the sovereign wealth fund. The second question about whether there are any tax or other incentives for investors coming into Guyana, the answer to that is yes, a definitive yes. In fact, we have very comprehensive regimes, sectoral regimes of fiscal incentives for investors coming into Guyana. So depending on the sector that you're coming in to, and depending on the scale of your investment, and sometimes depending on the region in which you're going to be investing, there's a variety of investment incentives that we have. Whether it is tax holidays for some sectors, like for example, Vice President mentioned that we offer tax holidays to persons coming in to set up call centers, because call centers generate lots of jobs. So depending on the sector that you're coming into, you could be eligible perhaps for a tax holiday. You could be eligible for fiscal concessions on the importation of capital equipment, so duty-free concessions on importation of capital equipment. And that regime, in fact, is the sectoral regimes or fiscal incentives, in fact, is administered by Peter's office. A lot of that information is already on the Go Invest website. If more information is required, then Peter's office would be very happy to provide that sector-specific information. But the short answer is yes, we do have a wide range of tax incentives that are offered to potential investors.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Dr. Singh. And one last question. I would be remiss if we let you get out of here without answering this. And this question is from Richard David. Are there plans to open modern banking relations with the U.S. and Guyana?
Okay, thank you. Modern banking relations, you said, right?
That's it, yep.
Very good. So here again, this is an absolutely excellent question. We do have, of course, as you know, a relatively diverse banking sector in Guyana. Right now, the banking sector is characterized by a couple of international banks. So we have banks like Scotia. We have Scotiabank, and we have the Bank of Baroda, the international banks. We have a couple of regional banks as well. We have Republic Bank, which is a large regional bank. And then, of course, we have a few indigenous banks. Now, right now, they offer fairly traditional retail banking services. And we have been for a long time trying to press them to modernize the services that they offer to customers and to integrate more with both modern banking practices and the international banking system. They, of course, have correspondent banking relations with international banks. So most retail banking services or banking services that are expected by corporate clients are available. But we're also in a conversation with the sector about really transitioning to a truly modern banking, financial sector. And there, we're looking at things like introducing merchant banking services or investment banking services, which right now are offered by one or two players in the market, but not at the level that we would like it to be. And so we are currently in conversations with the existing financial sector, and we have said to potential entrants into the market that we would like a rapid upscaling and upgrading of the range of banking services that are offered, including things like merchant and investment. So the answer to the question is yes, it is certainly our intention to work with the banking sector and to work with potential new entrants into the sector to facilitate a rapid modernization of the quality of services and range of services that are offered. But we right now do have fairly good, solid retail banking services by international, regional, and domestic banks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Singh has to leave us, but as was mentioned earlier, all of your questions will be answered and the answers will be posted on the foreign ministries, rather the diaspora.
Sorry, Floyd, not to interrupt you. I don't mind. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer, perhaps another half an hour or so.
Okay.
So I'm going to be here, but by all means, please feel free to take questions.
Sure.
If there are questions that you'd like to pose to me, I'm happy to take them.
Will do.
But I'm going to stay for perhaps another half an hour.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and finish introducing the remainder of the panelists, have them tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we will go back to questions. So the next panelist is Mr. Zulfikar Ali. He's the president of the American Chamber of Commerce, otherwise known as AmCham. Zulfi, are you there?
I'm here, Floyd. Are you hearing me?
Zulfi is joining us virtually.
Thank you very much, Floyd. Honorable Ministers of Government, Minister Singh and Kroll, distinguished members of the Diaspora. I do not wish to repeat what we have heard so far from President Ali and the engagements that we have had with the Vice President and other policymakers. I believe you are here because you yourself have either heard or experienced the potential for growth that Guyana has to offer for business and investment. So I would like to base my brief remarks on some of the more common questions that I have received from many investors that I've spoken to over the past couple of years. First, which sector can we invest in? That's the most common question, and Peter has mentioned that in his remarks as well. Well, the answer is very simple. Any sector that you believe you have either the knowledge, the skill, or one that you're passionate about. You have access to technology, you know about efficiency, and I know you understand how critical it is to provide services that meet international standards. So Guyana is open for anyone to invest in any sector. The incentives are there that Minister Singh mentioned, and you know you can go invest for that as well. We need to move past just remittances. You no longer need to send remittances alone to help your friends and families in Guyana. You can invest with them to provide services to the many new areas that are opening in the economy, creating sustainable livelihoods, not only for your family, but also at the same time provide another stream of revenue for yourselves. Another often question is in the area of economic, more so the credit risk of the country. Guyana does not have a credit rating, and that's what I'm told about all the time, and people are worried about that. Well, Guyana has had to claw itself out of the debt distress over the last 15 years or so. And we have been very prudent under the stewardship of Minister Singh and the government of Guyana in its debt management as seen by the IMF debt sustainability analysis. And I always refer people to go and have a look at it. The lack of a credit rating does not hinder our ability to attract investments into the country. And given our strong macro fundamentals and low external debt, when we do eventually have a credit rating, it will allow us to raise additional resources on the open market. But again, that needs to be managed very carefully. I can assure you also that the absence of a credit rating did not prevent the major players in the world to set up operations here in Guyana. It did not prevent Exxon or Hess to invest here. It did not stop the thousands of foreign firms that have registered here in Guyana to do business. So don't let that be an impediment for you to come home and to invest. You know Guyana more than any other international investor. Exchange rates and interest rate, Dr. Singh touched on that, so I would not, but that's a question that has always been asked. Colleagues, the opportunities presented by Guyana are vast and it is unique. The amount of resources available is massive, even on a global scale. And the fact that it is new and everything needs to be built up, the opportunities are many. With the world market so uncertain now, Guyana offers a stable and very bright prospect for investment. You have to be here to see the potential that exists in all of the sectors, to feel the level of optimism surrounding the business environment. And I have no doubt that it will encourage you to return and invest. There are many other questions, but they have been touched on already by the previous speakers. And I am available to answer any other question you may have. But before I end my remarks, let me say that I, as well as the chamber that I represent, AmCham Guyana, welcomes your investment into Guyana, if you choose to do so. You can rely on our support to help you navigate your entrance into Guyana. We have done so for hundreds of companies and would love to do so for the members of the diaspora as well. We ask that if you do decide to invest in Guyana, that you do exactly what you do in your investments wherever you are, that you follow the rules, that you get the requisite permissions, and that you speak with the recognized agencies, which are all set up to help you to be successful in your venture. Again, I'm here to answer any question that you may have, and feel free to reach out to me as well.
Zulfi, for that excellent presentation. Next, we will hear from Fazal Yusuf. He is the advisor on investment and diaspora matters at the Guyana Consulate in New York. Fazal, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Good afternoon to all participants in this breakout room. It is my esteemed honor and privilege to be on this panel. I was recently appointed as the advisor on investment and diaspora matters here in New York at the Guyana Consulate. And it's probably the first time that this position was being created here in New York to represent folks in the diaspora. So many of our panelists here are in Guyana. I'm here on the other side of the fence in the diaspora here in New York. And I must say, within the last 3 months that I've been in this position here, my office here in New York has been bombarded. Many of the questions that Zulfi just answered here, and Dr. Singh and Honorable Colin Kroll, those are the similar questions that we are getting here as to opportunities in Guyana, remigration to Guyana, what kind of incentives do we have as Guyanese living here in New York, going back to Guyana, whether it's to remigrate or to invest, etc. But I want to assure everyone in this panel here, and even if you're not on the panel, to share with your friends and your families and your coworkers, whomever you talk to on a daily basis, that my office, which is located at the Guyana Consulate here in New York, is here to serve you. My office is here to work along with all the ministries in Guyana to facilitate any kind of investments that you want to make, and to make sure that the process here that we often hear about is so much of a slow process that no one gets anywhere. But my office will work with my colleagues in Guyana to make sure that those questions are being answered, that your objectives in investments and remigration is being addressed.
Did we lose him? I didn't think he was finished. At any rate, we're going to move along. Should Fazal rejoin us, we will let you know. But I think that concludes the remarks from our panelists. In the interest of time, we will move the program right along. We're now going to hear from Waveney Kanai. Waveney will be asking her questions directly. Waveney, you may direct your question to any member of the panel, or you can just present it as a general question, which would allow any of the panelists to respond. Waveney?
Gentlemen, good afternoon. This is not Waveney. This is Waveney's husband, Raj. My question is, what program do you have in place for foreign investors to avoid any fraud and robbery, because I have gone through that, and I can tell you many trade and investors that I happen to know have had similar issues. So what do you have in store that could help to prevent this in the future?
Yes, can you repeat the question? I think we were having some technical difficulties. We didn't hear you clearly. And if there is a specific member you wish to respond, you can also suggest that.
Well, my question before was, what program do you have in place to protect foreign investment from fraud and robbery in Guyana? As I said to you before, I have gone through that, and I know many trade and investors that I know of that have had similar issues. So what do you have that would help foreign investors to avoid being afraid to invest in Guyana? And I have lost a lot, and I'm being very honest with you, I have lost a lot because of dishonesty of our Guyanese locals. Now, what can you do to avoid this problem to go on in the future?
Programs do we have in place to protect fraud and robbery, protect investors against fraud and robbery in Guyana? That's
right.
Sure. So I'm going to have a first shot at answering that. Let me say that the responsibility to avoid being defrauded or being robbed is a shared responsibility. So first of all, on the government side or on the side of the public sector agencies, Zulfikar Ali kind of alluded to it in his presentation just now. He said that his advice, part of his advice to potential investors was, one of the points that he made was deal with the recognized government agencies when you are setting up business. And that was really a very important point. So there are recognized government agencies who have specified mandates. And when you're seeking to execute a particular transaction with a public sector agency, it's very important that you go to the right government agency and deal with that government agency itself. So when it comes to fiscal incentives, like I mentioned earlier, Go Invest is the appropriate agency. Go Invest has an office, they have a website, and you engage with them directly. There's no need to speak to a middleman or a third party or to anybody who has to speak to them on your behalf. Deal with the recognized government agency. And when you're transacting business with the recognized government agency, they have written guidelines. They tell you what fees you have to pay. Any payment that you have to make to a government agency, you will get an official government receipt. Otherwise, you should not make the payment. No payment should be made to any government agency or to procure any government service without you getting an official government receipt from a recognized government agency. If you're looking to get a building permit or you want to process a transaction concerning land, Minister Kroll just gave an extensive presentation. The relevant government agency is CHMPA or the Ministry of Housing. And there's no need to deal with them through a middle person or a third party, etc. So the best advice really was the advice given by Zulfikar that a potential investor coming to Guyana should deal with the properly authorized government agency as it relates to government permits and transactions with the state. But of course, there's also potential for fraud and robbery in dealing with third parties. So potential partners that you might be entering business with, or potential co-investors, potential suppliers, or potential buyers. And here my advice to you would be simply to do what you would do anywhere else in the world, and that is to do your own due diligence. If you're going to enter investment or a joint venture with a party in government, with a private party in Guyana, it's very important that you do your own due diligence. Often, you know, I mean, I've heard stories, nightmare stories. Perhaps you've had some bad experiences. I've heard other stories. You know, people come and they have a friend or they have a person who they used to know, or they have a neighbor and they enter business with that person, and then suddenly they discover that the monies that they've been invested have been diverted to some other purpose. You need, it's business, and business, if you're serious about doing business, you know, that you have to do your own due diligence in identifying who you're going to partner with. You know, you might have historical relationships, or you might have a relative who has a friend in Guyana who says, well, I can manage your business for you. You know, I mean, if you decide to take that risk of doing business with somebody who you don't know, and somebody for whom you don't have proper testimonials or proper references, or they don't have a track record, then that's a risk that you are taking. And the government is not going to dictate to you who you should partner with or who you should do business with. We're not going to tell you who you should take as a joint venture partner, or who you should recruit as a manager, or who you should recruit to manage your business for you. The government doesn't get involved in that. You have to do appropriate due diligence, including getting appropriate recommendations or testimonials, or doing appropriate background checks to ensure that you're not contracting with a party who might defraud you. So there's a shared responsibility. On the government side, we will operate through the properly authorized government agencies. But in terms of your private partners or the private counterparts that you will do business with, our advice to you would be to do appropriate due diligence that you would do if you were doing business anywhere else in the world.
Dr. Singh, any other panelists wishing to comment? Great. Well, you heard it from Dr. Singh. Do your due diligence. It is a shared responsibility, and make sure that you're dealing directly with the government counterpart. The next question is from Sat Haripasad from the USA. How easy is it to incorporate a company in Guyana?
Thank you very much. It's actually very easy, and we are working, in fact, to even further simplify the process. Registering a company really is an extremely simple process. You typically you would, if you came to Guyana, you would, and you're not familiar with the Guyanese landscape, you would typically contract a lawyer perhaps to prepare the legal document, to prepare a very simple articles of incorporation. They're very standard documents that you prepare, and you register them with the Commercial and Deeds Registry, the Commercial and Deeds Authority, and your company is formed. So it's a very simple process. It does involve perhaps taking a legal advisor to prepare the corporate documents to register the company, but it can be done literally in a day or in 2 days perhaps.
Great. Okay, the next question is from Niebert David. What infrastructure is being built in Guyana regarding the oil industry to ensure that refinement of Guyana's oil is being done in Guyana? I think the question is going to the heart of, will we have an oil refinery in Guyana? Pete, you want to take that?
I wanted to mention earlier that projects such as infrastructure projects, including what the president talked about, Deepwater Harbor or the roads or refinery, will all be some form of public tenders. But the discussion on, we have the oil and gas plant that will be constructed in the near future. I'm sure that would be some form of public-private partnership, public tenders. So all those opportunities will be publicized. Dr. Singh?
Sure. Like Peter said, as far as public infrastructure is concerned, that is to say things like roads, bridges, ports that are built by the public sector, etc. Those we include in the budget, we tender publicly, we procure publicly, and through the public procurement process, they're publicized. I think the question was specifically about an oil refinery, if I'm not mistaken, Floyd, right?
Yes.
Let me say that on the question, we've been asked this question on a number of occasions. The government is not averse to an oil refinery being established in Guyana. We're certainly not averse to it. But the refining of oil is a commercial activity. It involves buying crude oil and processing and refining crude oil to produce refined petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, heavy fuel oils, etc. What we have said is that the government itself will not, as you know, our government has been removing itself from business. We're leaving business to the private sector. And we're occupying ourselves in government with performing the regulatory function. And so the business of refining oil, we have said we're not averse as a government to an oil refinery being established in Guyana, but the government will not establish one. We are open to private companies coming to Guyana. And if a private investor wishes to establish an oil refinery and is able to do so competitively and wishes to do so and has the capital, we are open to private investors establishing an oil refinery. But at this point in time, the government does not have the intention to establish an oil refinery of our own.
Excellent. And I'd like to echo that sentiment. I think for just about any industry, I think if you're a business person and you want to come to Guyana and invest your capital, take some risks, I think you will find an accepting and encouraging government, and you'll get the support that you need. The next two questions will be asked directly by the participants. The first person we will ask is Denise Allen. Denise?
Hi, good morning. First, I must say I am very pleased with this conference. It's something that I have been asking about for quite a while, ever since I was appointed as honorary consul here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, in the Caribbean, one of our main issues is transportation. I can say that both from someone who's had the experience of traveling to and from Guyana, and also as someone who's done business. And we have major issues with Guyana dealing with transportation. Number one, we don't have our own airline. And as someone who's grown up out of Guyana, I migrated with my parents when I was 8. I have always heard of Guyana Airways. And I think that now that the country is on an upward trajectory, one of the things that really should be a priority is reforming Guyana Airways. Now, it's not something that has to be done by the government only. I would love to see them do a public share issue so people like me can invest in the airline and be able to earn dividends and those kinds of things. So what I'm particularly interested in is an airline and shipping. The situation where any shipment out of Guyana has to stay in Trinidad and go through all those kinds of issues that we have there. You know, I've had the experience of losing a shipment of produce because it's overnighting in Trinidad and they forgot to plug up the reefer. I really think that investing in shipping as well as an airline is something that needs to be priority issues. And I would love to hear what the plans are for those two particular areas. Thank you.
Any of the panelists, will we have our own transportation, line or air?
Sure. Thank you very much, Floyd, and thank you. That was Denise, right? Denise. So thanks a lot, Denise. I hope all is well with you. It's St. Kitts and Nevis, right? So thanks a lot for asking that question. And it's a very interesting and a very important question. You asked about the establishment of a national airline like a Guyana Airways and improved transport links. Let me say, first of all, that we agree with you completely that good transport connectivity is absolutely essential to the environment of doing business. So we agree with you on the premise that improved connectivity will facilitate better and increased trade, for sure. So we're in full agreement with that. However, on the specific question of establishing a national airline, you've seen, no doubt you've seen, living in St. Kitts and Nevis, you've seen how countries in the Caribbean, and no doubt you've seen also countries elsewhere in the world, have struggled with various attempts to establish or to maintain state-owned airlines. We've seen, for example, the challenges with LIAC right now. You would know those challenges very well living in St. Kitts and Nevis. We're probably feeling the brunt of those challenges with LIAC right now. And of course, and the situation with air travel has, of course, been even further compounded by COVID, which has dramatically reduced the volume of air travel and has put some airlines literally out of business. So I will say to you that the current position of the government is that we want improved international connectivity. We don't currently intend, it is not currently on the agenda to establish a state-owned airline, but we are pushing aggressively to attract more international airlines to come to Guyana. And we're actually seeing the results of that already. So at a time when airlines are closing down their operations and reducing routes, we are seeing international airlines actually expressing an interest to come to Guyana. You have American Airlines, which, notwithstanding the international challenges with travel as a result of COVID-19, American Airlines has resumed their Miami to Georgetown route. They were actively considering a New York to Georgetown route, and I believe there is intention to introduce a New York to Georgetown route. If COVID had not happened, there was, in fact, American Airlines had actually planned to introduce a New York to Georgetown route. As you know, JetBlue has introduced it's New York to Georgetown as well, right? JetBlue has introduced a New York to Georgetown service, and they're currently providing that service. Virgin Atlantic has expressed an interest in coming to Guyana, and we are in active talks with Virgin Atlantic right now on them introducing perhaps a London to Georgetown service. We recently approved an airline introducing, I think it's a Turks and Caicos to Georgetown service. There are increasing connections to Suriname coming out of Ogle. And so the current approach is to try to encourage and attract international airlines to come to Guyana and to improve their services to Guyana from various international destinations. That's the current approach, rather than to introduce a state-owned airline. Having said that, if there is a private investor out there who sees that it is viable to introduce an airline, whether it is by way of leasing an aircraft and introducing a service from Georgetown to any route, if there is a private investor out there who's interested in setting up an airline, privately owned airline, and introducing services to Guyana from any destination, we would welcome such an investor doing so. We actively encourage it, and we would welcome a private investor who finds it viable. The same applies to shipping. We're not currently considering the introduction of a state-owned shipping line or any such thing, but we would welcome private investors who believe there is volume of traffic and they want to introduce, they want to buy, or they want to lease a boat and introduce a service from Georgetown to Port of Spain, or Georgetown to St. Kitts or St. Vincent or St. Lucia or the Bahamas or anywhere, or Miami. Any investor who's interested in introducing a privately owned shipping service would be more than welcome. That's the current policy stance.
Thank you very much. Again, we're a free market enterprise, which has historically been the engine of growth in most countries. The next question, I'm going to direct this to the Honorable Minister Kroll. It is from Sandra Chuakong. For land given out, will construction loans become available sometime soon to help with the development of these lands?
Construction loans are done strictly through the private arrangement. At the Ministry of Housing, we are not involved in terms of loan. But for the construction sector, for persons who are seeking loan, and Minister Singh can expand further, as a result of the response on the housing sector, we've had a lowering of the interest rates. And so New Building Society, for example, which is the agency for low income and now for moderate and middle income, for which has been the setting of the standards. The private banks, you'll be surprised, they are now on board and they have all lowered their rate as a result of the pressure and as a result of the confidence in our commitment that you will have huge loan portfolios because of the allocations that we are making, that will see many of these banks from the private banks that will be benefiting from persons who are seeking those loans. So it's more a direct arrangement from that perspective.
Thank you, Minister Kroll. The next question, I'm going to direct this to Dr. Ramsarup, and it is from Rashid. The government mantra is that the government of Guyana is open for business. However, do you think that the actions taken by the government against officials of a company which were allegedly operating a concrete factory without the requisite permits, by asking them to leave the country, do you think you're sending the right signal to investors?
Well, I think there were two different issues that was addressed specifically with the concrete company. The main one was more an immigration issue that was dealt with based on our immigration laws. But from an investment perspective, I did meet with the true investor of that company. They did not break any rules. Basically, they had just opened the container and were setting up the operation. So I think the media muddled the immigration issue outside of an investment perspective. It's still a very good investment. We're working with the true investor. His directors that represented him, I think, did him a disfavor. But our investment climate is on board. We are working through the requirements, and I encourage all investors to ensure that they spend time on the regulatory permits that are necessary. Our office is there to help facilitate that, and again, the media and the response to the immigration issue should not be tied to the direct investment.
Thank you, Dr. Ramsarup. The next question, I think only Dr. Singh, I think only Ashley can answer this. Is our money in the Sovereign Wealth Fund earning any interest? That question is from Dr. Jerry Jailal.
Thank you very much. Let me say this, that as the Vice President indicated when he spoke earlier, we came into government with a natural resources fund that was already in existence, and that in fact was set up by a law that was passed by the Parliament after the no confidence motion had been approved. So the no confidence motion, as you know, was approved in December of 2018. the Natural Resources Fund Act was passed by Parliament in 2019 with no opposition involvement, no opposition input, and in fact in a parliament where there was no opposition participation. And that is the fund that is currently in existence. And that is the fund that we met when we came into government. The fund currently, in its current configuration, is not actively invested. As you know, it is our intention to reform, to restructure the fund and its management and its governance. We have said that in due course we will be going to Parliament with a new law to address some of the deficiencies of the current arrangement. And at that point in time, we will also consider the arrangements for an active investment strategy for the fund, a prudent but active investment strategy for the fund. But at this stage, the fund is not actively invested. I think I'll answer in that using that formulation.
We'll take a couple more questions. The first one we'll take from Derek Arjun. Are you there, Derek? You can pose your question directly to the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Congratulate those who organized this conference, and I hope it's not a one-off event, but it's indeed the beginning of the engagement with the diaspora. My question is directed to Minister Kroll, who said that he has in his ministry a land use unit. That is a necessary and praiseworthy department. However, when you drive around Guyana, particularly Georgetown, you witness a hodgepodge of buildings, business processes, and other events that interfere with the quality of life. I'm referring to the president's address, who said Guyana was on the cusp of development, and not only material development, but he wanted to have Guyanese enjoy life. My question to you, Minister Kroll, is as follows. When will your ministry begin regularizing the character, and if not the character, business processes in Georgetown? And if you intend to, will you work with the mayor of Georgetown, who is from the APNU, in bringing order and aesthetic attraction to our capital city? Thank you.
It doesn't matter who is in charge of any local authority. Both the CHP and that local authority has to work in conjunction with us. But I presented that the single window as an answer to addressing and bringing uniformity in terms of our approvals. And so that is one of the things why we're pushing for that electronic single window. It's to address, for us to all of us be on the same page in what we're doing. But in terms of Georgetown, there's a fact we must recognize. Georgetown, for what it is, has obviously evolved over the years. And now even more so with the advent of the oil and gas sector, you will find, therefore, the push for more commercial activity. And hence, you'll find more residential moving out of central Georgetown as part of relocation, individual relocation plans, and even from a governmental level, we are pushing to have more housing areas available in other regions. And that is because at the end of the day, Georgetown, for what it is and for where it is located, will be further transformed, and the landscape of the next few years will certainly change tremendously, including for many of those businesses who will want to further expand and even startups of small hotels.
Thank you, Minister Kroll. The next question will come from Bali Singh. Are you there, Bali?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is related to the agro processing industry and was wondering what specific plans and incentives are there for the infrastructure development and agro processing and marketing. Thank you.
Was there a question? Oh.
Yes.
It wasn't clear? Okay, can you repeat
Okay.
so the Honorable Minister can get clarification?
Did you hear my question? I'm not hearing.
Yeah, we're just asking you if you can repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was specifically on the agro industry. What specific incentives and plans are there from the government for the agro infrastructure development and processing and marketing?
What plans are there in place to help or assist with agro processing?
So
Yes,
why should I, Peter, have a go? Why don't I will have a first the question and then Peter maybe can elaborate if you wish. So first of all, like I mentioned earlier, we believe that there is a lot of potential for agro processing, for us to move from being simply a primary producer of agricultural products, you know, fruits, vegetables, livestock and meat and so on. We believe that there's a lot of potential for agro processing. And as a policy, from a policy position, we are encouraging persons to invest in agro processing. Now, what, from the point of view of what incentives we're putting in place or what plans we have in place. First of all, I want to speak a little bit about what plans we have for agriculture, because that's related to agro-processing and agribusiness. We want to promote larger scale agriculture. So we're currently constructing infrastructure. The question was asked about infrastructure. We're currently constructing infrastructure, specifically roads, that will open tens of thousands of acres of new arable land to be brought under cultivation. And I'll get to why that is important for agro-processing in a minute. So we're constructing a new road from number 58 village on the Quarantine Highway to Kanji Creek. So that road is going to go from the Quarantine Highway at number 58 all the way into the Kanji Creek. And it's going to open up literally tens of thousands, I think at least 40,000 acres of new agricultural land, make that land accessible. So that immediately creates an opportunity for persons to cultivate those lands, whether it is for a specific crop, and we're open to any crop that farmers or potential farmers believe will be viable and competitive. We're also investing, we have in the budget resources to open up land in the intermediate savannas, specifically for corn and soya, because we believe that Guyana has tremendous potential in producing corn and soya, and there are investors who are ready to invest in large-scale cultivation of corn and soya. Thirdly, in West Demerara, we are opening up land there also. We're building the Parika to Goshen road, and we're building a road from essentially that will establish a link from Bartica to Timeri. So there will be barges across the two rivers and a road link from Bartica to Timeri, from the west bank of the Demerara River to the east bank of the Essequibo River, linking Bartica to Timeri. That immediately opens up tens of thousands of acres of land. So from a physical infrastructure standpoint, the opening up of that new additional acreage, both on the coast and also in the intermediate savannas, creates an opportunity for larger scale agricultural production. Where you have larger scale agricultural production, the prospects of agro-processing being competitive are significantly improved because you have more competitive, you have the advantages of scale. Secondly, you would have heard of the Gas to Shore project and the Wales Development Authority. The Gas to Shore project is going to be bringing the gas resources that are currently extracting in our oil industry, land it on shore, pipe it to Wales for the purposes of harnessing those gas resources for electricity generation. When that is done, that is expected to bring down the cost of electricity by at least 50%. In fact, some estimates say that we can bring down the cost of electricity by about 60%. What that does is that immediately reduces the cost of any processing plant or any packaging plant. And I mentioned that too from the infrastructural standpoint. So the question asked about what we are doing to promote agro-processing. And I mentioned those investments in infrastructure, both roads infrastructure to open up new lands, and also investment in electricity to bring down the cost of electricity, to make agro-processing more competitive. But even as we do that, we currently work with investors who are interested in processing agricultural produce right now. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We have currently investors who are processing primary agricultural produce into processed products like fruit juices, fruit pulps, sauces, and condiments, including things like pepper sauce, jerk sauces or spices, fruit pulps, etc. Bottling and packaging those in very attractive, internationally marketable packaging. And if you see the quality of the packaging and the quality of the products that are being put out, you'd be incredibly impressed. They could be on a North American supermarket shelf very, very easily. And their work they're producing right now. And we have provided fiscal incentives to facilitate their operations, including things like duty-free concessions on their capital equipment, the factory and plant that they brought in to do the processing. We have provided duty-free concessions under the fiscal concessions that are administered, like I said earlier, by GoInvest, and Peter might wish to come in later, like I said. So there are actually people right now who are packaging fruit pulp and fruit juices in world-class quality packaging. There are people who are packaging things like, to give you another example, just recently I heard of a company that is now bottling milk. And I said to them I was going to visit their operation to see what they're doing. So they're taking, previously, you had all of this milk produced, cow's milk produced in places like Maikoni and elsewhere, and it was sold as, you know, a primary product, you know, cow's milk. This is a producer who is now pasteurizing that milk and putting it in bottles and putting it in supermarket shelves. And these are world-class products, an international quality pasteurization process, and an international quality bottling and packaging process. And here again, we've worked, state agencies have worked with that investor to facilitate the establishment of their investment. So even as we invest in the infrastructure for the largest scale agro-processing, there are people who right now are investing and are producing very good quality products. And we have worked with them either through provision of fiscal incentives, or through other forms of partnership or facilitation to help them to set up their businesses. I mentioned a few examples. I don't know, Pete, if you wish to come in to speak, to say a little bit more about this.
Just a little, I think, was very comprehensive. Definitely, I use the term from the hockey player Wayne Gretzky. You have to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. And as we, move to cheaper energy, the future of agro-processing, as Dr. Singh mentioned, is significant. We have investment packages being reviewed right now in packaging of cement, potentially, doing the cement right here in Guyana. We're looking at opportunities in many other areas in the agriculture sector. So, as we open the lands, as Dr. Singh said, to large-scale plantation farming, there are opportunities in agro-processing. We talk about the coconut industry. It's not just about the coconut water. The components of the coconut shell, moving it into mulch and charcoal, and the fiber using for development of roads. There's so many byproducts of what we have here that the investment opportunities abound in many other value-added products of our agriculture sector.
Thank you, Doctors Singh and Ramsarup. We're going to take a couple more questions as we wind down. The next question will come from Alicia Boyle.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for a very comprehensive virtual seminar. My comment and then a question. Based on, I have a consulting firm in the Bahamas, lately established a branch in Guyana. And what I've been experiencing is a lack of full understanding of the importance of business planning. So while we have all these ideas to do X, Y, Z, I find that not enough emphasis is being placed on proper research and planning. So I would like to encourage you guys to push this to the population and help them to understand that. My question, however, is we hear about foreign investors coming into the country and et cetera. In the Bahamas, there is the National Economic Council, which screens foreign investors, making sure that they collaborate with local investors. Can you help me to understand or point me in the direction where there is a similar initiative in Guyana, where foreign investors are obligated to bring on a local investor, and there's an actual strategy of you employ X amount of Guyanese and et cetera. Thank you so much.
Floyd, I think with you sitting on the local content policy, you may want to describe that part.
Describe
the local content initiative.
Oh yes, well we were impaneled, I think, back in September to come up with a framework and recommendations for local content. I think currently there is a draft policy that's being floated around, but the intent is to make sure that Guyanese businesses and Guyanese get their share of the action. We're going to make sure that the foreign companies coming into Guyana to do business must use Guyanese labor and must use Guyanese businesses, subcontractors. There will be enforcement objectives and penalties if businesses do not comply. We are very, very serious about it, and the government has made it very clear, both the Vice President and the President, that if you're going to do business in Guyana, you must look for Guyanese businesses, as long as those businesses and the individuals can offer the same level of, or the same quality of goods or services that the operator expects. We cannot force the operator to just use talent because it's Guyanese, because if we promote that type of thing, any inefficiencies in the process will increase the cost of the contractor, and that cost then redounds to the Guyanese taxpayer as part of cost oil. So it has to be a balancing act, and I think the government is doing an excellent job at striking that balance. But we are promoting local content very aggressively.
And in addition, in our office, have both exposure to both the local capacity and the foreign investor coming in to look at different opportunities. So we do our best to facilitate those discussions through the Private Sector Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, the Guyana Manufacturing Association. And in your initial comment about business planning, definitely that's an opportunity for folks to help through that process. We do require business plans for investment, with pro forma and very detailed. We find a lot of local companies are stepping up to the plate to help the local businesses get their plans together. Joint ventures is an important aspect of our role at Go Invest to help facilitate the best we can, matching capabilities. And our focus is, we do not discriminate between local and foreign, but we do encourage. And I can tell you over the last 6 months, from an investments perspective, I've had more significant, large local investors come through our office than foreign direct investment. So we're very pleased to see that our local businesses have stepped up to the plate. We're seeing shore bases being built, led by local content, and many moving into large-scale manufacturing, indigenous companies expanding, as Dr. Singh said, in producing products that is exportable around the world. So we're pleased to see the local content investment actually taking a leading role in the future of our nation's progress.
Thanks, Dr. Ramsrup. The final question for the day will be asked by Kay Harding.
Good afternoon, thank you. Are you hearing me? All right, my question would be in two parts. One, I believe, for Dr. Ramsrup, and the other in part for Dr. Crowell. Legislatively, what's being done to improve ease of business in Guyana, and the financial frameworks that are in place, what's being done to ensure that we move from a more cash-based society to one that favors electronic payments? And lastly, for Dr. Crowell, what's being done with regards to building legislation and the new buildings that are actually being constructed? How are those going to be kept compliant with regulations that should be in place? Let's say green buildings, LEED certified buildings, ADA compliance. So that would be my three questions.
Sure. So thanks a lot. I'll probably take the first two parts of that question. So I think, Mr. Harding, the first two parts of the first of your three-part question was about what is being done to improve the ease of doing business. So there are a number of things that are being done to improve the ease of doing business in Guyana. And some of them have already been alluded to. So for example, the work that we're doing to strengthen the operations of Peter's office. So Go Invest is currently being, since we came into office, we have revamped Go Invest. We have appointed a new board, we've appointed new management, we have revitalized the office. And the mayor revitalizing of Go Invest has improved the ease with which investor facilitation is being executed. So investors now have a single point they can go to navigate the bureaucracy, to help them with, to obtain advice on permitting, to obtain advice on fiscal concessions, and to have their investment facilitated. So that's one example of what's being done, particularly in relation to investment facilitation. I could give you a number of other examples. So Minister Kroll spoke earlier about the single window that is being established for building permits. That's a single facility that is being established by the Ministry of Housing, and Minister Kroll would be best placed to speak at length about it. I'll mention it just briefly. But we recognize that persons or businesses should not have to go to multiple places and multiple agencies to get permissions if they want to construct a building. So previously, you had to go to get permission. You had to get your plan approved by one agency. You had to get an electricity certification. You had to get the fire department to examine your building. Multiple agencies were involved in certifying your building or inspecting your building. We want to streamline that, so you go to a single agency which will facilitate the permitting for your construction. And that's the single window for building construction and permitting that Mr. Kroll mentioned. Like I said, perhaps you might like to come in and elaborate a little bit more about what it will do. And in addition, we're working also on a single window for trade transactions. So the Guyana Revenue Authority is currently working on a single window similarly to facilitate trade transactions, so you don't have to go to multiple agencies to get your permit. Right now, if you want to execute a trade transaction, you have to go to multiple agencies, maybe Food and Drug, or if it's depending on what it is, Pesticide and Toxic Control Board. If it's a chemical of a certain sort, you have to get a permit from them. Then you have to go to the GRA to pay your taxes. We want to streamline that. So if you're executing a trade transaction, you can go to a single agency and execute your trade transaction. Those are just some examples. In addition, we're trying to reduce the time for processing permits to make it more efficient. If you have to get a permit or a license, you should be able to do that very quickly and very efficiently. Somebody asked earlier about the length of time it takes to register a company. All of those things, we're working to reduce the length of time that it takes to register a company, to register a business or a business name, to get a license to operate, to get a permit to build your building, to execute your trade transaction. So, there's a lot of work going on all of the aspects of the ease of business, on which you can potentially assess the ease of doing business in Guyana. I could give more examples, but I don't want to take up too much time. The second part of your question was about what is being done to reduce the use of cash in the economy and to increase, to reduce the use of cash, if I got the question, and to move to more electronic means of payment, etc. You're absolutely right, and you raised a very important question, and it's one that I feel very strongly about. And I agree with you completely that we should, we really do need to be a less of a cash-based economy, and there really is no reason for any business or any individual to have large volumes of cash on hand. So we've been working with modernizing with the banking sector to modernize the banking system. Now, literally every bank in Guyana issues internationally accepted credit cards. So, and in fact, many of the banks have now taken the decision that their debit card, so even if you don't apply for a credit card, the debit card that you get issued as soon as you open a bank account, you get an ATM card to access your bank account. There are a couple of the large banks have taken the decision that their debit card or their ATM card will be a Visa card. And so that has immediately put in the hands of tens of thousands of persons a Visa card, even without them having to apply for a credit card. Their debit card is now a Visa card that is accepted at everywhere that you see a Visa sign. So increasingly, Guyanese households and Guyanese businesses have access to credit cards or debit cards or internationally accepted or internationally portable cards. And increasingly, businesses are accepting debit cards or credit cards. So pretty much any supermarket that you go to in Guyana, pretty much any restaurant that you go to in Guyana today accepts certainly accepts international credit cards. Your Visa or your MasterCard will be accepted immediately. If you have a debit card that is a Visa card, or they would certainly accept those. But they even also accept the non-branded domestically issued debit cards. So even your regular bank card that is issued that might not necessarily be an internationally branded credit card or debit card can be used to pay at pretty much any restaurant, any sort of reasonably big establishment, any supermarket or so on. But there's still large pockets of the economy that are heavily cash-based. This is something that we want to encourage people to move away from. So in government, we are also trying to move away from cash payments and check payments and move towards more electronic means of payment. So for example, I had taken in my previous term of office, I had taken a decision that we will not pay anybody a government salary by cash or by check. We will pay, if you're a government employee, we will pay you directly in your bank. And right now, that is exactly the arrangement that we have. So unless you live in the hinterland, where, let's say you're a teacher or a policeman in the hinterland, where there are no bank branches and you don't have access, easy access to a bank, unless you live in a remote village in the hinterland, once you live on the coast or you live in a major urban center, and that applies to almost the overwhelming majority of government employees, all government employees are paid their pension directly into their bank. And we want to do more of this to execute more government transactions that you are paid directly in your bank account, so you don't have to handle cash or you don't have to handle checks. We think there's a lot of potential for this to be done more, and I'm really glad that you asked the question, because every additional advocate that I can find, that I can mobilize to advocate moving away from a cash-based economy and moving towards electronic means of payment, I would encourage. So I'm glad that you asked the question. We're doing a lot in government, but there's still a lot more that needs to be, including by the private sector. I think the third part of the question will probably be taken by Minister Crow, and Colin, you might want to address this business of the single windows. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And so in addition to what Dr. Singh said, one of the advantage with the single window system that we'll introduce, and note it's electronic, is to remove the aspect of subjectivity. And we are also working on a broad-based document to have more information be readily available. So that, because I think it's the previous person that asked the question about availability of information and guidelines. And so that is what one of the results we're expecting from that introduction of that electronic system. I want to use the opportunity to make mention that someone asked about a question in relation to Georgetown, and to say that the representation of the Central Housing and Planning Authority Board, it's broad-based, and all the municipalities are represented on that board, including the municipality of Georgetown. So they too have a say in terms of the decision-making for approvals. So it's not being done necessarily in isolation. We recognize that we need to push to move this electronic single window system quickly, and that is why we're endeavoring over the next 4 months to have a system, legislation be brought to Parliament for approval. And my final point is to repeat a point I made in my presentation, and that is with respect to the timeline for approvals. We recognize that as an investor, you want to ensure that the timeline that is stated there for the approvals is done within sufficient period from one board meeting to the next. And so we are going to ensure that we will legislate that all the necessary agencies that have to give their no objection or their approval before we can process the final report for approval at our board, that there's a timeline that we set for them to reply. So no agency, whether it's the municipality of Georgetown or whoever else, will be able to hold any approval request at ransom. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants. This has been an extraordinary event. As a member of the diaspora myself, never before has it been where you had a chance to engage with the decision makers directly, from the president on down, senior ministers, CEOs of organizations. Typically what it has been is you go to an embassy and you meet one or two ministers. This has been different. And it underscores the government's seriousness about engaging the diaspora. And it sends a strong message. So I want to thank all the participants, the Foreign Ministry. And again, Rosalinda, thank you for an amazing, amazing job of pulling this together. This is just the beginning. It's not a one-off. We hope that there's continued engagement. You have the number as well as the email address. We hope you will continue to communicate. And all of your questions, we didn't get a chance to answer all the questions today. But as was said earlier, the questions will be answered. The answers will be posted on the website. And we'll be here to answer questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today. So again, thank you all for participating. I don't know if anyone else wants to. This is it. And we're at the end of an amazing program. Thank you.
The country is on an upward growth trajectory with the burgeoning oil and gas industry, the thriving tourism and hospitality industry, and the endless possibilities for development in every sector. Guyana received several international awards in the tourism sector, including the prestigious #1 Best Ecotourism Destination Award. Pre-COVID-19, Guyana saw a steady increase in visitor arrivals. However, the travel industry worldwide suffered due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and Guyana is no exception, as is evident by the statistics provided by the Guyana Tourism Authority. With the prospects in the oil and gas industry and the PPPC administration's transformative development agenda on stream, opportunities for investments are immense. With the discovery of a vaccine and the imminent recovery of the travel industry, it is inevitable that there will be a need for more accommodation facilities. This administration took office on August 2, 2020, and since then it has begun fostering the enabling environment that will see the hotel industry expand. President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali has committed to providing 2,000 hotel rooms in the next 5 years, and there is a holistic approach to making this happen. The government, through the Ministry of Tourism, has received many expressions of interest from international branded hotels.
The response was overwhelming. The hotels, we've signed several MOUs, and we expect some hotels to start as early as this year, the first quarter, to start developing and construction.
The existing Marriott, Pegasus, Sleep Inn, and other local hotels will soon be part of a wider variety of hotel options. Several major hotel brands have indicated their